All right, so yesterday we issued our findings in report form. This office, a legal analysis memorandum, and the state police issued a narrative of Detective Sergeant Michael Brock. The materials on which we relied, for the most part, are on our website, and so the information and the analysis is out there. So it's not my intention, and I'm not going to go through all of that analysis again here. But for purposes of efficiency, knowing the levels of interest in this matter, we decided to together to make ourselves available this morning if there are any questions.
Yeah, General, when considering whether or not to file charges in this one, was it a close call or was it a pretty easy one when you looked at the evidence?
Well, it's a complicated matter. And I think the legal analysis memorandum really lays that out. It took a long time for us to really understand the intertwined relationships here. So I guess I'll just say it was a complex matter. It was not a I've been involved in a lot of investigations involving elected officials, and I would say that as those matters, as I kind of stack those matters in my head, and there's, it's probably approaching 10 anyway, this one was very complicated in terms of the factual scenario. Just a lot of players involved. And the way that the Supreme Court has narrowed the definition of bribery, it was really as we say in the memorandum, it took a while to kind of weave the threads together and really get a understanding of what the facts were in this case.
General, the governor responded yesterday in a statement saying this confirms what he's been saying all along, that there was no wrongdoing and that this was a waste of taxpayer money for something that was going to come up empty all along. What's your response to that?
Well, I guess it depends, Brian, on how you define wrongdoing. Certainly, the governor's correct that there are no criminal charges brought here. With respect to waste of taxpayer money, investigations are what this office and the state police and our fellow investigators do all the time. And sometimes those investigations lead to criminal charges and sometimes they don't. I don't think it's a waste of taxpayer money for us to do our jobs, to investigate allegations like this, where at first blush, they warrant additional inquiry.
If I could just follow up. The
of course.
Governor back then in 2021, when we asked him questions, said it was a competitive bid, he had no say, and denied that ILO had an inside track. Would you say what you found showed that he was not telling the truth?
Well, I think the report speaks for itself, and I think what the report, as we say in the report, that the governor plainly interfered in the bidding process, and that evidence from where we sit can't be seriously disputed. That's what the report says, and I stand by that. I'll leave it to you to interpret what that means.
General, the governor, according to the report, declined to be interviewed by the state police for this investigation and others. Can you walk us through how that played out and who this office or the state police interacted with in trying to communicate that with the governor?
Tim, I can't because frankly I don't remember all those steps. I'll just give you the typical way these things work. Either the investigator or the lawyer, the prosecutor, will reach out to counsel for a person, an elected official or otherwise, and it's one of the reasons these things can take time, that that person has to decide whether or not they want to be interviewed. It's their right not to be, and that takes some time. It's one of the reasons this took a little more time than I would have liked it to, but that's how it typically works, and that's how it worked here in general.
Who did this office communicate with? Was it him directly? Was it an attorney? And if so,
yeah,
who was it?
Look, I think in the first instance we communicated with a counsel for the governor. And then later he had private counsel.
Who was his private
counsel? I believe it was Bill Murphy, Tim, but don't hold me to that. That's a question probably best addressed to the governor. Okay. But I want to be clear. The governor had every right not to be interviewed, as did anyone else who we asked to interview with us. Yes, Nancy, go ahead. Just one second, Kathy. I'll come back to you.
I have a follow-up on that.
Don't worry. I'm not going to leave before you have a chance to answer your question, so no worries.
Thank you. Was there any consideration of convening a grand jury, of subpoenaing the governor or other key witnesses to force them to testify? And if not, why not?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the challenges, one of the reasons we've had a grand jury report bill in for now every single year of my administration has been this balance between using the grand jury as an investigative tool, which the Supreme Court in Rhode Island has reaffirmed a number of times. It's not just a matter of going in and getting an indictment, say. It's an investigative tool and a powerful one. The difficulty is that without that grand jury report statute, that at the end of that process, if there are no charges, and you don't really know until you go in, then we are in a place of not being able to share with the public our findings. And so what I've had to do here, because the General Assembly has not acted on that bill, is to balance somewhere along in the investigation the relative merits of going to the grand jury versus public transparency. I don't think that's a place where I should have to live, frankly. That bill that we've put in is not controversial in my mind, and it should, I hope, someday pass. But that would allow us to use the power of the grand jury as an investigative tool and still share our findings with the public after the investigation is complete. I think that is a helpful tool. Other states have it. The federal government has it. You could certainly limit it, say, to public allegations of public corruption or excessive use of force by law enforcement. But I think that's a useful tool, but we don't have it yet. And so, that's a balance that I have to weigh. And I don't like being in that position, but I accept it. And I think in this case, we made the right call.
General, if I could
Yes, go ahead, Kathy, sure.
Your report said insufficient evidence to bring a criminal charge, specifically bribery, but do you believe there were ethical violations?
Well,
as a starting point.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, so, we analyzed the ethics laws to an extent, but let me be clear. To the extent there is a campaign finance or ethics violation, or if there were one, that would be a misdemeanor. And this office is not, how do I put this? We are focused on very, very serious misconduct when it comes to government officials. And I believe that to bring an action against any elected official, that number one, the evidence has to be very, very, very strong. And the misconduct, from a criminal perspective, really should rise to the level of a felony. So while we analyze those misdemeanor violations, and I believe we analyzed them correctly, that's not to say that we are trying to usurp the jurisdiction of the Board of Elections or the Ethics Commission. They have their own roles, and they're free to do whatever they think is appropriate.
Well, simply, okay, no criminal, no ethical violation rising to the level of a felony, but did something go wrong here? Did something happen in government that shouldn't have happened, and what was that?
Well, look, I think the report speaks for itself. It's really, the report lays out the role of the governor in this procurement process. And from where we sit, we laid out what we believe happened. And we cited the evidence that resulted in that belief. And I'm confident in it. And that's why the report says that the evidence that the governor involved himself in the procurement process, can't be seriously disputed. That said, that alone does not rise to the level of criminal misconduct. It may violate state procurement rules. I mean, we don't have a bid rigging statute, for example, in Rhode Island. The law is what the law is, and we analyze the facts in the context of the law and try to explain it in the best way we could.
General, to that point,
I'll come back to you. Eli, go ahead.
I guess I'm wondering if you're concerned that, the evidence clearly showed that there was clear coordination between the governor and his political allies. The people involved were setting up the structure of the bid and the price, and they even said that it was fixed, and that the message is that there are no consequences to that. Are you concerned about that?
Well, look, the only consequences that are within our jurisdiction are whether or not a crime has been committed. The public has a right, I believe, to know what happened, and the public, I think, now knows what happened. None of the facts that are in that report or in Detective Sergeant Brock's narrative have been disputed by anyone, including the governor, frankly. So the facts are what the facts are. I can't create consequences that we're not capable of bringing. If there was a case here, we'd have brought it. But we concluded at the end of the day that there wasn't, and so we didn't bring one. And that's what we do all the time. I have, and the team here has been doing this for a very long time. I mean, Lieutenant Colonel Kramer and I were just reminiscing upstairs about all of the matters involving public corruption that we've been involved in. It's a very, very long list. And there are cases where charges have been brought, and there are cases where they haven't. I do think that writing a report in the way that we did is warranted. And the reason I say that is because all of the records here that the report relies on could be obtained by the media through the Access to Public Records Act. Now, in the federal government, if you file a FOIA, having been U.S. attorney, well, I'll be long gone and buried before that FOIA request, comes back to a member of the media. But the APRA statute here, for some of its warts, actually works pretty well in the sense that you get an answer one way or the other quickly. You don't have to wait 8, 9, 10 years. So all of these records would have been available to the press and public eventually. And so it's my view that the report, as we've written it, can put these complicated facts in context so that, from where I sit at least, they're not misinterpreted one way or the other. Let me come over here and I'll come back.
What happened to the federal investigation? The report underscores that this is only the result of the state investigation.
Yes, sir.
What happened to the federal investigation?
I really can't speak to what any other investigative authority did, Ed, out of respect for them. To the extent one existed.
Complete also?
I can't speak to what any other investigative authority may or may not have done.
And you mentioned the U.S. Supreme Court decision.
Yes.
Would the result of this investigation have been different if not for that?
I can't say that, but I will say this. Back when we did Mayor Moreau with the state police, back when I first became U.S. attorney, we originally convicted him of a federal crime involving gratuities. If you remember, Mayor Moreau awarded a contract to board up all the vacant buildings, so-called. They weren't vacant, that was the problem, in part, in exchange for a furnace that Mr. Booth-Ouellette put in his home. For some of you, this is ancient history, but for me, I feel like it happened yesterday. And in that case, the theory of prosecution was that the mayor accepted a gratuity, so we didn't have to prove quid pro quo, this for that exchange. The First Circuit, in a case in Puerto Rico, eliminated that theory of prosecution. And so, over time, this theory of public corruption, the theories on which you can prosecute have been increasingly narrowed. So, for example, it used to be, when I first was coming through the federal system, based on a case called Sawyer, that you could prosecute federally and under honest services fraud conduct which violated a state ethics code. That whole theory of honest services fraud has been eliminated by the Supreme Court. So now you have to prove in real time that someone got X for Y. And it's really hard to prove that, in my experience now, unless you have one of the following things. You either need to be up on a wiretap, as we were in the Oster case, and we could show exactly what the former town administrator was getting in exchange for something else. So in that case, it was cash for approvals. You've got to have an undercover who's willing to wear a wire, and that was the case of the 3 North Providence town councilmen. Or you've got to have a case like the case involving Lincoln Park and Wembley, where the English company was trying to bribe John at the time, where the general manager of Lincoln Park kept putting all those bribes in writing. And so really stupid, but he did it. So absent those 3 things, if you're doing a reactive case instead of a proactive case, getting the intent at the time anyone does any particular act is very, very difficult.
Just last one question there. You drew a distinction in the report between the personal gain and the political gain. What's the difference?
Well, the law requires one. So you can, someone can, under the bribery statute, offer something that benefits the government generally. You've got to show a personal benefit to an elected official. So
That contract didn't benefit the governor?
Not in a personal capacity. Had the benefit gone to his campaign, the answer would have been different. But we concluded.
To be clear, there was benefit. It's just who. The question that you guys struggled with was who did it benefit?
Well, no. In what way did it benefit the governor? Governor, like all of us, in elected office have two capacities, right? The official capacity, which is what I do when I'm in this building, and when I'm running for office, what I do as a political candidate. If the quid benefits me as a candidate, that's one thing. Okay, that's a problem in exchange for an official act, right? That's like taking cash in exchange for an official act. But if it benefits me in my official capacity, then that's a very different scenario, and that was what we had a hard time parsing.
And that's okay.
Based on the evidence. Yes, based on bribery law, that's correct. Yes.
General, respectfully.
That's a dangerous lead-in, but go ahead, Steve.
Well known that there's no love lost between you and the governor.
Yes.
Speak to the public perception that may play a role in the persistence of this case.
Yeah.
Going after this case and the length of time that it's taken.
Yeah, well, I don't think the length of time is what cases take. And, again, if I go through my experience, Speaker Fox, House Finance Chair Gallison, I've mentioned some other cases. They all take a fair amount of time. And if you look at our report, the state investigation, which was really about 18 months, which I don't think is all that long. In terms of my relationship with the governor, I acknowledge that it's not very good. But I can separate, and I've been able to do that for a very long time, any kind of personal feeling I might have from the work that we do. And there are a lot of people here that work on this matter that aren't me, and I have great confidence in those people, and they, to the extent that I acted in a way that was inappropriate, they are a check on me. That was true when I was U.S. Attorney, so I have real confidence in the people around me. I will only say this, Steve, in this place and at this time, that I've always felt like we have a job to do in these cases. And I don't think there's ever been an elected official that we've investigated that has appreciated being investigated. But it's never personal for me. It's a job that we have to do. And I've been doing it for a very, very long time. And I think the only thing I can offer the public is that if you look back over the course of my career, I have tried to act in a way where my decision-making is based on the facts of the law, and the facts are in our memorandum. It's in the memorandum of Detective Sergeant Brock. It's in all the records, Steve, and the public can make its own decision.
Just to follow on that, you've given us a list of public corruption cases that you've pursued.
Yeah.
How many of which have ended in a no prosecution?
Well, many others, but we don't often speak about that. Certainly that was true when I was U.S. Attorney, and it may have happened here. But I do think that handling cases in this way is a benefit to the public. And look, it's not unusual. We have a diocese investigation report that's going to come out shortly after the first of the year. We've certainly charged cases. There will be other people identified in that report that we haven't charged. The Mueller report is the most famous example of writing reports like this. But certainly there have been many, many other instances of it.
Have you spoken to the governor about this case?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
General, following up what Steve said, this is now, I think, you investigated Tony Silva, you investigated Bud Craddock, and as he mentioned, it kind of came to the same conclusion, no criminal charges, but a public report and a public rebuke. And again, just speak to why you think, and do you think that's appropriate if you're not charging someone to make sure everybody knows they might have done something that doesn't look great?
Yeah, look, I think, we're caught between, how do I put this? People who may not want us to share what we think or share the facts, and then people who want public transparency. And you can't have it both ways. And so where I sit on this is this. First of all, reports of this nature are not unusual. There have been reports written by special prosecutors or non-special prosecutors about public matters, both on the state AG side and on the federal side. So they are way less unusual than some might think. That's number one. Number two, as I said earlier, all of this material on which these reports rely, hold on a minute, Brian, is public. And so someone needs to put it in context. And I believe we are, as we say in our report, I believe that we are best positioned to do that.
Well, you mentioned they're public. What do you think of the use of personal emails here by the governor when he was a public office holder, whether it was lieutenant governor or governor and the other people people involved here. What do you make of the use of public emails discussing this process?
In
I'm
what?
sorry, private emails.
In what?
Personal
In
emails.
what way? Us making them part of the record, or
No, that they were using. What do you take as a conclusion from the fact that they were using their personal email accounts to discuss what should have been a public?
you know? I look. I think you and the public can make their own judgments about that.
Can I jump in with, going back on a couple of things you said? Number one, they're all public. Until I read your report, I had no idea that Chief for Change had a $15,000 a month agreement with SKDK to do work for the governor, and they were back and forth with both McGee and Julia, whose last name I don't exactly know how to
Raphael
pronounce,
Bear.
and other
Raphael Bear.
people in the governor's circle. We would never have seen that but for your report. So that's my first of a couple.
So you're saying it's a public service, Kathy?
I'm saying to you, you're saying it all would have been public. Not so.
well-
How would we have ever known that somebody who had no official role in government, no official transparency of how money was flowing from who to who for what, was paying somebody else to do either business or personal work for the governor, and these people were identified as one of the governor's consultants. So it wouldn't have been public, right?
Well, let
Am I
me-
misunderstanding
A
that?
little bit, but I understand why you're asking the question. So what I mean is that their public is, let's say we had gone, as Nancy suggested, to the grand jury, and the outcome had been the same, which would mean there are no charges, okay? We would have said that the investigation was over, okay? And then someone in this room, maybe all of you, based on what I've seen of your work so far as Attorney General over the years, is excellent. And so you would have asked for all of the records that the state police or we have pertaining to our investigation. And those records would have been available to you at that point, right? You surely would have asked that. I know you would have. And so that's what I mean. So once it's over, and you ask for those records, you're entitled to get them. So let's say we had just given you all these records. So we announced yesterday, it's over, there are no charges against the governor. Let's say we had done that. You would have asked for those records. You would have been entitled to them. We would have given them to you. And, maybe you would have easily put together what it means both legally and factually and serve the public very well in doing that. But I believe that this office and the state police together are in the best position to not only pull the facts together and tell the story holistically, but also analyze what it means legally. And I think we're uniquely positioned to do that, and that's why we did what we did.
If I could follow up on that point. As you know, we all asked at different times if the governor's office would give us copies of any subpoenas that had been issued to the governor or members of his administration, and they refused. So were any subpoenas issued to the governor and or other members of his administration? And are you willing to make them public so we can see what they wouldn't share?
Well, look, I can only say that the report lists everything that was done in connection with the state investigation. And so, if there was a method used to obtain evidence in the state investigation, you not only have the evidence, but also the means by which it was obtained.
But will you give us copies of the subpoenas? It's just one more set of potential records that would shed light on what we're looking for over the course of
Well,
this.
Kathy, in the state investigation, there were no subpoenas issued.
Okay, then my next question before, because I see my colleague.
Well, I'll go to, don't worry, Richard, I won't leave without answering your question, I promise.
You
But
will-
let's finish with Kathy. I think we'll finish with her.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to you.
You mentioned at least one law we don't have, and I'll cite it in a minute, but I'm wondering what laws do you think we need after going through this whole exercise? You mentioned we have no bid rigging law.
Yeah.
How could we have no bid rigging law?
Well-
And if we did have one, might there have been a criminal charge?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate on that, Kathy. I do think this office can't be everything to everybody. In a way, we are filling, in a sense, the role of an inspector general, but certainly we're not going to do that in every single time someone alleges there's been, waste or abuse. I do think that there's room, and I've said this before in other contexts, there is room for the General Assembly to do real oversight. I mean, when I say real oversight, subpoenas issued by the General Assembly, but it's up to them to decide to do that. But I think the question coming out of this, having seen the facts as we have described them, and again, they speak for themselves, is for others to decide whether additional work is necessary. But I don't want to speak here today about what I think somebody else should do. I just want to answer your questions about the work that we've done.
Would the state benefit, would the taxpayers benefit if, number one, we did have a bid rigging law, and number two, do we need an inspector general?
Well, look, I think, as I said, I think today's work, I'll come to you, Richard, I promise you're next. I think the work that we disclosed yesterday demonstrates that there is a need for someone in cases like this to obtain the facts and share what we find with the public. I think, candidly, that the work that we did together was a public service, and the public can use it to whatever end they'd like. But I think yesterday was a good day for transparency, and frankly reflected very well on the state police and the members of my office who did the work. Now, Richard, go ahead.
All right. One of the things that came out in your document was the way that there seems to be some amount of political influencing that happened between the governor and the Department of Administration in the way that contracts were being issued, that they were about to give the contract to someone else until the governor intervened. There have been a number of instances where there seems to be questionable contact, questionable, I don't know how to phrase it, behavior by the Department of the Administration under the McKee administration around contracts. And I was wondering whether there was any appetite at all to suggest that there were questions that needed to be asked about contracting in general, either by your office or by the General Assembly. Well,
look, Richard, I think I'll just say, excuse me, that the extent of the investigation was pretty wide-ranging, and I think you can see that from the report. Again, I mean, you've got a lot of players involved here. You've got Mr. McGee, and you've got ILO, and you've got Ms. Raphael Baer, who's part of ILO and Chiefs for Change, and you've got the third-party city fund, I think, whatever it is, and then you've got SKDK, and so there's a lot of players there. But the fact that we had to find where all of those players fit in this scenario took a lot of time. But we followed the facts as they pertained to this matter, and we did not go beyond that. And because for no other reason, there was plenty of work to do here. This was not an easy lift for the investigators to try to get to truth here. But I admire the work that they did, and I'm grateful for it.
General. Along those lines, if I can just...
Yes, sure.
Can you or the Colonel quantify the man-hours or the dollars that went into this investigation?
Well, dollars are hard, right? Because, certainly, I mean, I'll let the Colonel speak if he wants to this point. I'm just going to answer from my office. This is what we do. In this office, we have 14,000 right now pending felony cases. If you were to walk out this door and go into screening, there's a ton of cases we don't bring that the police investigate or that we investigate. So that's what this office does. We investigate, and let me finish, Steve. Sometimes we charge and sometimes we don't. And so the notion that, oh my God, the resources were wasted, the public can decide whether in this context resources were wasted. But I always, and I don't mean this, I'm not directing this at you, the notion that, first of all, I think as an independent elected constitutional officer, it's my job to decide how I spend my resources, not somebody else. And I will say that I think this administration so far, I'm proud of the work that we've done and the way we've done it. But let me just say this. How we spend our resources, meaning investigative hours, lawyer hours, is my decision. And I think that both reports demonstrate why those resources were well spent here.
Not asking you to justify, I'm just from a quantitative standpoint. I think people would be interested to know what kind of time and
a lot of time.
Resources went into this.
Yeah, I can just say a lot of time. I will say, this is the kind of case, had I been U.S. Attorney, would have taken one lawyer, maybe two lawyers, 80% of their time over 2 years. Now here, my friend John Marrera doesn't have that luxury. So, John, how many cases are you handling? Do you have a sense?
A couple dozen.
Yeah. So John is carrying, in our public integrity unit, a couple dozen. So this probably, I don't want to speak for him, but this occupied a good percentage of his time.
Does Colonel even want to add anything?
You can add something, Colonel, if you like.
I do not want to add anything.
All right, very good.
I just
Go ahead,
want to
Eli.
understand something correctly you said earlier. Did you say that there was enough, perhaps, evidence here to bring misdemeanor charges, but because it didn't rise to the level of a felony, that you decided not to?
No, I'm not saying that, Eli. I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, we really focus here on serious felony misconduct. I mean, we handle very few misdemeanors generally across the state. I mean, I only have 4 lawyers who do misdemeanors. You know, so the vast majority of those misdemeanors are done by city solicitors that no one's ever heard of and change over all the time. So this office is always focused on felony conduct. Sure, we looked at it here, but our focus was on the bribery
Was there
statute.
enough there for misdemeanors?
Well, we analyzed it and we found no. But what I'm saying is that, you know, how do I put this? Our focus here was principally on any potential felony charge. We didn't find enough evidence to bring one.
General, when you, go ahead. No, go ahead.
The report mentions that the investigation was paused from February 22 to mid-23. Why was that?
Oh, clever, Ed. I can't speak to that, but it's nice of you to come back to the same question in a different way. I haven't gotten a lot of sleep because my father's not doing so well. But even when I'm a little sleep deprived, I'm not going to fall for that one. So I can't answer that question.
General.
Nancy, go ahead. I know you've been waiting.
Sure. So I think when this investigation first started, you know, the public knowledge, the reporting that had been done really was centered on the contract awarded to ILO, and I was awarded to this higher bidder that is newly formed that McKee's team has some alliances with. At what point did your investigation, was it from the outset or was it later, and if so, how far in, did you start to sort of untangle this web between Chiefs for Change and SKDK and this kind of like secondary?
Yeah, you know, Nishi, I can't pinpoint it, but it wasn't in the beginning. Right. And, you know, that's the way these cases develop. I mean, I remember the case we did involving Speaker Fox. It began, you know, over there. And I've said this before, Tim. You've heard me say this before. You know, it begins over here, and you end up over there. Or as you're investigating this, you learn more about that. And that was true in Fox, too. I mean, after we executed the search warrant with the state police, we found evidence of bribery that we didn't know when we started. So it's not unusual to start an investigation looking at one thing, and then you find other things, and you have to chase that down.
And one follow-up to that, did your office or did the state police consult with the state ethics commission at all?
Yeah, we were in touch with both. I know we were in touch with the Board of Elections along the way. I don't know if we talked to the Ethics Commission or not, Nancy. We can get back to you on that. I just don't know as I stand here.
General.
Yes.
When everything landed on your desk, was there anything in there that surprised you?
When you say everything, what do you mean?
All the evidence, Sergeant Brock's affidavit.
Yeah, well, it didn't really land at one time, Tim, as I'm sure you know.
Okay.
I mean,
Did anything from this investigation surprise you?
Did it surprise me? Well, look, I think I'm naive, okay, in a lot of ways. How do I put this in a way that isn't taken the wrong way? I don't think it's difficult to spot where at least the perception of what you're doing, it would cause the public to lose confidence in you. I mean, I think maybe it's because I'm a lawyer and we issue spot all the time. I kind of see those things coming, and another time I could give you examples of it. And look, I have a very good. When I started here, there was no person who advised the Office on Ethics. We didn't have that person. It was rather remarkable. We had one at the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was Skip Lockhart. It was terrific, as you'll remember. So Kate Sabatini is my ethics person, and so you just. Look, I've recused from some things and not recused from others, and that came up in this context. Should I recuse, given the antipathy between the governor and I? And so I think I was a little surprised, I guess, that with some of the ham-handedness here. But then again, I've been doing this for a long time, and in some ways I wasn't. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying is you're surprised not by an individual thing that was uncovered as part of the investigation, but that we're here at all.
Yeah, look, I think if you're being well advised, and I am very well advised. Look at Ladie Goldstein. How do I put this? If I were to disappear from the planet today, she's the person I'd want the public to have as their Attorney General. When you're well advised like that, it's really a good. When you have good people around you, you don't end up in a place where the public can lose confidence in you. And so I think a lot of being in one of these positions is making sure that people around you are really extraordinary. I've been really fortunate as U.S. Attorney. I had great people around me. Two or three of them followed me over here. Steve Dambrook, who would be standing here, is waiting for a jury verdict in a murder case. I have the benefit of having great people around me, and so that's really helped me. And I think that can help others if they choose to have good people around them.
General, I just have to follow up on you saying you were
Well, let Steve answer and then
surprised by the ham-handedness.
Yeah.
Speak to that.
Well, I just think the report lays it out. I just think the report lays it out. I think the ham-handedness is evident in the report, in the way this was handled. Kathy?
Well, you used the phrase, the perception that would cause the public to lose confidence in you. Is that what you think this report should do, or has done? Let people know what happened in a way that they should lose confidence in?
Well, I can't speak to that, Kathy. I think the public can make its own decision. I don't think I need to make it for them. I mean, I think our job is to lay the facts out, lay the law out, try to do it fairly, which I think we did here, and then let the public make their own decisions. Yeah, Brian.
And your own perception of it?
Look, I think I signed the document, so I agree with its findings, and I think the reports speak for themselves.
The report did spend a fair amount of time on the communications deal with SKDK. Do you believe there was a quid pro quo?
Well, we didn't find evidence that would allow us to prove that issue beyond a reasonable doubt, as we say in the memo. All right, is there more? You always do, Nancy. That's okay. You're quite good at this.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on what Ed asked about the pause, because my interpretation was that the pause was in the state-led investigation, not the federal investigation, and so I would hope that is something that you could answer about why.
Yeah, we had a pause, and the report lays out sort of the timing of the pause.
Right.
What I can't speak to is the why.
Okay.
I just can't speak to the why.
We know from our own reporting that SKDK was a campaign consultant for about 9 months, and there was no sign of payment there except for some de minimis amount for a website, I think.
Website, yeah.
So, what you're saying is that their work was being done for the public good? That's the determination?
Well, there are a number of, as the report lays out, Eli, if you, being an elected official, having run for office, there are many scenarios where someone will offer, for example, advice 18 months out from the election, once or twice a week. And they don't get paid until the media buy. Sometimes there are companies, and we talked to the Board of Elections about this, that sort of do it on kind of a, how do I put that? You volunteer. It's almost like being an intern, and then, hey, really good intern, we'll hire them. And so that is not problematic. But from where we sit as prosecutors, I think anyone who spends a lot of time on campaign finance, and I fortunately don't have to do that, would tell you that there's some real gray areas in there. And we can have a conversation another time about that. Like,
I think it should have been reported as an in-kind contribution.
Well, look, our report speaks to what we found. And so I don't want to get beyond what our report says, Eli. Okay?
Can we ask some questions of the Colonel?
If the Colonel's willing to answer them, of course.
I do not have anything to add other than what the Attorney General has already stated. Thank you.
I have a question over here.
Oh, hi.
Hi, we just got here, but.
Sure.
Maybe you already mentioned this, but as you said, it's not rising to the level of criminal charges, but how important it is to make this investigation public? And is your office also taking a look at future contracts that are, also connected with this administration?
Yeah. No. I would just say that we take up matters as they come to us, and they come to us in all kinds of forms. Sometimes they're media-driven. I mean, Channel 12, I believe, broke this, and certainly there was follow-up as a result of that. And that happened in Moreau too. The Hummel report led us to that case, if I remember correctly. Other times, it'll be someone will come to us and say, "Look, that happened in the 3 North Providence town councilors case, where another town councilor came, I believe, to the state police and reported misconduct. It happened in Ray Gallison. So there are lots of ways it comes to us. I do think, as I mentioned earlier, that reporting what we find in this way serves the public. It's not unusual, even though you'll hear from some quarters that it is. It happens quite frequently, actually, across the country, federally and stateside. And we can provide examples if people are really interested in that. So it's not unusual to do it. It's unusual for an attorney general in this state to do it. And I just learned over time, I've been doing something like this job for a long time now, since 2009, in one form or another, that the public wants, demands answers. And where we can give them to them fairly, then we should do it. And I think that builds confidence, not only in this office as a fair arbiter of issues like this, but builds confidence in government generally. And I think we should do it, and that's why we did it here.
Now, also, how to work, or do you think there should be more work done in terms of cases like this for more overseeing or supervision, maybe, before the actual contract goes into, signing and effecting all of that?
Well, look, I think that the process here worked in a sense, right? In that there was a DOA, Department of Administration review team, that did the analysis that the procurement laws require. And had it stopped there, then the process would have worked just fine. It just didn't stop there, as the report lays out, and that's really where the problem lay. Okay, are we done? Very good, everyone.
For anything?
Hmm?
Are you running for anything?
Oh, I'm just running for Jamestown.
Of the town council?
No, the back porch. My wife and I maybe will travel a bit. I don't know. We'll see what she wants to do in a couple of years. I feel like, look, I've been doing this a long time. You don't really realize it until you wake up and you realize you're in your 60s, and then you decide how you want to spend that decade, and I'll have to decide how I want to spend it. I know I want to sail more than I did in the last couple of years. We'll see. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, Jim.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel.